In this video, we are going to build a simple personal blog and implement Google Authentication as the authentication service. So the main focus of this tutorial is implementing and using Google, or basically Gmail authentication, considering that we have React as the frontend and Django REST framework as the backend. But in order to do it properly, I wanted to come up with a simple web app so that we can have the authentication in practice, similar to real situation. Now let's take a look at the project we want to build. It's really simple. Here we have a list of posts, and by clicking on each item we can go to each post and we can see the content. So here if I click on the first link, I can see the title and the body for the post. So it's basically a blog, a personal blog. Now if I want to check the VIP link here, I can't see the content and it says you need to log in to see the post because we are not logged in. So to see the post, for the user to see these kind of VIP posts, they need to log in with Google. And here it is, the Google authentication. You just need to click on this. Then let me close this, try one more time. So it shows a pop-up, and here I can choose my account here. Then I need to verify it, and then now I'm logged in as Milachiri by my email. And now if I click on this VIP link here, I can see the content. It's amazing. So you can basically with this tutorial we can create a personal blogging system that gives the ability to the user to log in with their Gmail account. We have a nice navbar here. We use Bootstrap here to do the theming here, and it's not really complicated application. We just wanted to prove that Google authentication works and see how we can implement it in our project. Okay, before jumping into the code and do the actual coding, I'd like to present basically how Google authentication works, and you can apply this to other social applications as well. Pretty much all work the same. So here we have clients. Basically in our project it's React application. So user here, let me log out. Here user wants to log in. So this is our client. The very first action is that user click on this button, and basically this sends a request to Google, and the API is Auth, Google Auth. Basically this is the API we use. And the next step, based on this official documentation from Google, Google API service then opens a dialog for you, for the user, so that user can, let me get back to the app, so that user can choose the account they want, they verify it, and what happens here is completely behind the scene. And basically when the user verifies the account, then Google sends back access token basically to the client, to the React basically here. And now after that we need to send back this client ID basically to the server, to the backend, which is Django actually here. And then in the backend we need to verify that token again with Google API service. Then Google API server, if the client ID is okay, it gives us an access token and all the other information we want, for instance the email for the user. So then with that email we can check if we have this email in our system, in our login system, or if we don't have it we can create a new user with that email. Then the rest is completely similar to other user registration and login based on Django and Django REST framework. So from that point on, everything is dependent on Django REST framework and simple JWT basically we want to use. It has nothing to do with Google API server anymore from that point on. Okay, so this is a brief introduction of how basically it works, but it may looks a little bit confusing at this point, but I promise that when we want to implement it, it will be really simple and you will understand it, how it works, because as much as possible we want to implement everything by ourselves. Okay, I think it's time to start, but in the first part I just want to create the web app. We wanted to build the main functionalities of the project. Then in the second part we're going to implement the Google authentication here. If you want to check the project and see the source code, you can go to my GitHub actually, and there is a repository named Google Login Django React, and here you have basically two folders, one for frontend and one for backend. It's really simple. You can use it as a basic template for other projects, and yeah, that's it. So if you don't want to, code everything from scratch, you can use this source code. Now the very first thing I'd like to do is creating the folders, something like this here we have, and I highly recommend that you use an editor for coding. I suggest VS Code for that, so go ahead and install VS Code if you don't have it. VS Code, it's really simple. You just need to download the right version for your OS and then do the installation process. That's really simple. I've already installed that, so I don't need to install it again. I just open my terminal and here go to the directory you want, and here I want to create a new folder for our project. I'm gonna call it blog with Google Auth. Let's use uppercase letters. Blog with Google Auth, something like that. Then go to this, create two other folders, one for backend, one for frontend. So now I want to start with frontend basically, but let me open my VS Code simply by saying code dot, and now here I can have as many terminals as I want. So I'm gonna create a new terminal, cd to frontend, and here I want to create my React project. For that you need to have Node installed on your machine, also npm, which comes with Node by default, and then also you need to install npx with npm. I'm not going to explain all these things. You can watch my other tutorials on this. So if you don't have Node.js, you can simply go ahead and install it. Just say install Node.js, and then you can find the right version for your OS and then install it. It's really easy. Then you will have npm, and for installing npx you can say just npm install npx, and you can see, check the package. It's like this. It's really easy. And as soon as you have all these tools, you can create your project with npx react, create react app. It's going to take a while, so I'm going to make it fast. Doctor Strange, it was really fast. Didn't work. Oh yeah, we forgot to specify the name of the project, or you can just, if you want to leave it without name, you can just put dot here. So it's gonna take a while, so I'm gonna fast forward it during editing. Now we should have our project here, or we can check it in VS Code. So this is a file that contains all the packages and modules we're going to install for our project. And in src folder we have the basic files we need to have. We don't want to touch public, and basically this is the final result after we build our project, which we don't want to do it for this tutorial. And in this folder we have all the modules installed. Also, we don't want to touch that as well. So the main area we want to work on is src folder here. So let me run the project, see how it looks. npm start, as simple as this. It's going to open the browser automatically. So this is a really simple React project. Let me to clean it a little bit. I want to get rid of all the data here. I want to say simple app, and also I want to get rid of all the CSS, app.css basically here. Get rid of this, and now we have a really empty web app with React. So now the very first thing I'd like to do is installing Bootstrap. Basic Bootstrap is a module, is a framework, you can say, on top of CSS and JavaScript, that you can come up with really nice and easy styles and themes. So Bootstrap version 5, and you can have navbar, all kinds of forms, really fast. So go to components, for instance, and here we have navbar. So for instance, I'm gonna copy one of these navbars here, because I want to have the login button in the right side. So I think this one is quite good. I can just copy that and go to maybe app.js here, just paste it here. If I save this, you can see that it didn't work because we haven't installed Bootstrap and other modules, related modules yet. So let's install it. I'm gonna open a new terminal here because I want to keep it open here. I want to keep the project up and running. So, and here I want to say npm install jQuery, basically popper.js, and also I'm gonna install Bootstrap itself. That should be fine. Let me try it. Let me also install npm popper without the JS part. That's the right one to install. Popper.js, I think, is an old module. We can check package.json to see if we have the modules. We have jQuery, Bootstrap version 5. Now when we have these three modules, Popper, jQuery, Bootstrap installed, the next step is adding the import lines to index.js here. So I need to say import Bootstrap this CSS bootstrap.mean CSS, and in the next line, let me copy that simply. Bootstrap this JS here and bootstrap.bundle. Now the navbar should be there properly. So let's check it. And you can see that we have a really nice nav which is actually responsive. If I try to try small width, you can see that the icons, the buttons turns to be a hamburger menu like this, which is awesome. Now if we go back to the project and take a look at app.js here, it's a bit messy. So we have components in React.js. Based on that, we can actually split the project, divide the project into smaller pieces, and then we can put the pieces together to create the whole project. So I'm going to create a new folder in src called components, like this, and I'm gonna come up with a new file called header.js here, which is basically a component here. And to create a component, you need to use this structure in React.js. Basically, we have two kinds of components, class-based and function-based, and these days the function-based is more popular, so we go this way. And as you notice that I just typed RAFCE and then it generates the structure for me. It does this with a plugin called, let me go to plugins, with ES7 plus React plugin. So you need to install it in VS Code. Also, I highly recommend that you install some other plugins like Prettier to make the code look better. Also, auto rename tag is a really useful plugin. So as soon as you install that plugin, you are able to just type RAFCE and then hit enter. It generates the structure automatically, or you can just code the component by yourself. Now I want to grab the whole header from here and put it inside header basically. Now we need to import our component and use it wherever we want. Import header from components header. And we can use components like HTML tag, basically HTML element. So if I see the end result, it's the same as before because nothing's changed. We just changed the structure of the project. Now the next thing, I want to work on the basically list of the contents here. We need to show to the user. For that, I'm gonna come up with another, instead of putting all the codes in app.js, I'm gonna come up with another component. I can put the new component in components folder, or actually I can create another folder. You can name it whatever you want. I'm gonna call it page because it's more of a page rather than a simple component. So in page here, maybe it's better to call it page. And the very first page I'd like to have is post list page.js, and again race with enter. And for this, I'm gonna use Bootstrap again. So we have something called list group in Bootstrap, so we can use it easily. And I'm gonna go with simple one because we just want to show the titles. Now to see the result, we need to import it as well here. Import post list page from page/post list page. And I'm gonna put it under header post list page. Save. If I see the result, okay, we have all the titles we want. Later on, we want to get the data from the backend with API, and then we're gonna put the actual titles here. But for now, it's just sample data, and I'm gonna leave it as it is. But let's say that we want to have some titles, for instance, VIP basically. So I'm gonna use a component in Bootstrap called I think it's badge, and I'm gonna go with this badge danger. So I copy that, and then I'm gonna put it somewhere on here inside one of these items. Save and see the result. Okay, looks good. VIP. And we actually later on we want to use links here so that we can click on this and then it goes to the actual page for that post. But for now, I want to leave it as it is. Now let's work on the actual post page. Basically, I'm gonna call it post detail page. Post detail page.js. CE, and here I'm gonna use modal, for instance, or card. I think card is a better option. We just need to have a title and a body. It's not complicated that much. So I'm gonna go with this and then remove the button actually. So I put it here. Remove the button, we don't need it. And let's keep the data as it is right now. Also wanna get rid of the card title here, because we can put the title here, post title. So now one thing is that I can import post detail page here and then put it here in the app.js, but the problem is that basically React is a framework that gives you the ability to build web applications with a single entry point. So basically now to have different pages, we need to command React to go use different components for different paths. So we can use React router DOM module here to have different routers and to have different routes and have different paths and assign different components, different pages to different paths. I'm going to show it to you in a moment. So let's install npm install React router DOM. Now in app.js, first let's import the necessary modules. I don't need logo, let's get rid of that. And at the top, I'm gonna import browser router routes and routes from React router DOM. Now I need to wrap the whole application with browser router and then because we want to have the header in all the pages, so we keep it outside the routes. We define routes block, and then inside this we can have different routes. So for the main page like this is basically the index page, the main page of the application or website. I want it to be exact, and I'm gonna use element or basically component post list page for this, like this. So basically it says that when you are in this path, it's gonna load or render this page, this component. We can define other route as well. So here, if it's in, for instance, blog post, I don't need exact, use post detail page, and we need to import it as well. Post detail page. Okay, now let's check it. So I'm in the main path here, so we see this component, list component basically. If I go to this route block post, here we see post detail page. So this is how you can control routing in React.js. Now I think it's time to implement the APIs, create the backend project, and then build the APIs and then use it in the frontend. We are done pretty much with the basic structure of the frontend. Now for the backend part, the only thing you need to have already installed is Python. So it's simple. You just need to go to python.org, and from there you can download the right Python package for your OS, and it's really easy. As soon as you have Python on your machine, let's go to VS Code here. I'm gonna create open a new terminal here. So also I'm gonna go to cd to backend, and I want to install Django and other packages. Usually I first create an environment. You can go ahead without creating an environment, and it's okay, but it is recommended that you create a Python environment so that you can have all the modules for your project in one place. So when you install Python, pip package manager for Python basically comes with Python by default. So you should have pip already. You can check it with pip -- version. So or you can say, if you have Python installed, Python 3 -m pip -- version, and you can see that I have pip installed. So you need to first install virtual env to be able to create virtual environments for Python. I've already installed that, so I can go ahead like this: Python 3 -m virtual env, and the name of the environment, I'm just call it env. Now I need to source env and activate like this. Now I can install all the packages without actually putting the Python 3 prefix in the beginning, because the environment already is based on Python 3. So I'm gonna create install Django, pip install Django, and here we need to create a new Django project simply with Python or Django admin start project, and the name of the project, I'm gonna call it core here. Now if we check the folder here, we have core. So basically when you create a project, Django framework will create a main app inside a project with the name you specified. So here we have main files, here we have settings, here URLs, the main entry point for URLs in the project. So for our purpose, I'm gonna create another app inside Django project. So I can simply go to core and here can say Python manage.py start app, and I'm gonna call it my blog. So basically apps in Django is something similar to components in React. So you can divide your project into different apps, and then well, the whole project is a combination of different apps. So every app can do a particular thing. Here, for instance, my blog is responsible to handle all the logic for blog system. Then later on, we're going to create another app for user authentication and these sort of things. Okay, now I can simply run the project to see how it works. So Python manage.py run server, copy this URL, paste in the browser. So this is a basic Django project we have. And if I check my blog app here, you can see that it has pretty much similar structure. We have models here, views, and some other files. I'm going to start with models. Basically, models is you define the structure of your data here, and then Django with the ORM system it already has will communicate with the database and create all the tables the application needs. So you don't have to write SQL queries. You just need to define your model and then use the methods and functions provided by the internal ORM of Django. So I'm going to create a model for blog. I'm going to call it my post. Models.model. I'm going to have title models dot char field, max length would be 200, null true and blank true, body pretty much the same thing. I'm going to use text field here. Null true blank true, and also I want to have a flag here, models Boolean, so it's either public or private, and authenticated users only can see the private posts here. And basically with this field you can specify if the post is public or private basically. And here also I want to define str methods. Return self.title. So the good point, the good thing about Python is that Django is that it already has an admin panel out of the box, so you don't have to, write a lot of codes to have a dashboard. You already have access to good dashboards, so you can enter data, edit data, and do all sorts of things. So let me create, open a new terminal here. cd to backend, source the environment again, bean activate, cd to core, and No, because I created a model for Django to create the schema, and then based on that schema create the tables in the database. First we need to create the schema with Python manage make migrations. The reason is that when we create a new app inside a project, we need to add it to settings. So go to settings and add it to installed apps here. So my blog. Let's run make migrations again. Something's wrong with the field here. Models text field. There's a typo here. Save it. Make migrations again. Run again. Boolean field. Okay, now if you check this folder here, migrations, you can see a new file which is actually including the schema for the table we want. Now we need to create the table actually with Python manage migrate. So now we can have an access to the admin panel by going to admin. Here we need a username and password, so we can create a super user. Python manage the py, create super user. Username would be admin, email address whatever you want, password 1234. Yes. No. Admin 1234. So here by default I can see the users and groups, but I can't see my model. I can see the posts, so I need to add it to the admin site. So go to admin.py in your app and here say admin site.register, and first let's import our model, my post, and here add my post. And if I refresh, let's do it again. Okay, everything looks good. Go to my posts, and here you can simply generate new posts. So we don't have to come up with the forms for adding data basically for the testing phase. And actually, because this is a personal blog website and we don't want other users to add content, we can just go ahead with this, and we don't want to come up with the specific UI for that, and it's good enough for us for now. So let's add some data. I'm going to use ChatGPT to generate some data. So I ask ChatGPT generate 5 paragraphs about technology. Each one must have one title. You can do the same. So I'm going to copy and paste. Copy, paste, and we can check it to be public or basically private. So I'm gonna keep it public, save, add another, copy. I want to make it basically private or VIP. Let's add another one. And keep this one as public. Okay, good enough. We have 3 posts here. And I think now it's time to create the APIs for fetching data basically. So later on we can fetch data and show it in the front end. So to do that we need Django REST framework. Let's install it. Pip install Django REST framework, and we simply go to views here. Let's first define the URLs we need. So in my blog app I'm going to create urls.py from Django URLs port path URL pattern patterns path. So the first API would be for fetching all the posts, basically the list of titles, not all the posts but list of titles. So posts, you can call it whatever you want, and for the second argument we need a view for that, and for the third argument we need just a name. Let's call it posts. So for the second argument I'm gonna come up with a view called post list, and my plan is that we can have either class-based views or function-based views. Here I'm going to use class-based views. So post list and as views as view like this, and we haven't created this view yet. We're gonna create it. So from the views port post list. Now let's go to views and create this view beneath. Simply I'm going to say class post list, and I'm going to use, let's go to Django REST framework, take a look at the documentation. It's really great, the documentation over there. So API guide, here we can see views. We have class-based views, and also we can see function-based views. Or we can go to class-based views here in tutorial part. And for instance, we have all kinds of views. I'm gonna use something called list views. You can find it if you search enough, but it should be like this: from REST framework, or actually framework, from views, import API view, from REST framework dot generics, import list API view, and I'm going to use this list API view for now. and it makes it really easy to have a view. So I can just set query set to be my post dot objects dot all, and here I need to have a serializer class. So I'm gonna call it my post serializer, but we need to create it. We haven't created yet. Serializer. Let's import my post from that models, import my post, and let's create serializer. So we need to create a folder file called serializers.py from REST framework dot serializers, import model serializer, and also from models import my post, create a class for my post serializer, and inherits from model serializer like this. Define class meta. Model would be my post simply, and for the fields here, because it's just a list of titles, I don't want to return the body, so I just want to return ID, title, and the flag of being the flag for showing it's public or private. Public, good enough. Now here let's import from serializers, import my post serializer. Okay, this is the URL here. Something's wrong with this. Extra parentheses. Now the only thing left to do is that we created a new URLs for this app. We just need to include it in the main URL because this is the entry point for the app. So I'm going to use path, and if the route starts with blog, use or basically include my blog.urls. Let's test it. Let me include. Okay, now if you check the app, it's good. Simply we can use browser for testing the APIs, or we can actually install a plugin called Thunder Client, which makes it really easy to work with APIs. It's something like Postman, but it's free and it's integrated into VS Code. So after you install that, you will see a button here, an icon here. So I can say new request. Let me just copy the URL. So our API is blog, and then check it in URLs, blog and posts. So here, posts. And you can see that it works fine, and we get a list of titles basically with the flag. It's true, false, true. Now the next step is using this API in the frontend to show the list of titles. Now, before using this API in the frontend, let's create the other API for fetching the whole data for a post. So let's get back to URLs for the app, my blog app here. I'm gonna create another path for fetching post. So I want to say post, and we want to pass the ID of the post as the parameter. So str pk, and I'm gonna call the view post detail, and again I'm gonna use class-based view here. It's better to be post. Let's import it as well. Post detail, and now let's create the view. Class post detail, and because later on I'm gonna add some logic for fetching basically the data based on the situation of the user, if the user is authenticated or not. So I'm gonna use API view here, and we have get object. So self the pk try, return my post objects. You can use other functions like get object or 404 from Django. We just want to go like this. So return the object, return the post with this pk. If there is any, if you can find it, return it. Otherwise, except my post does not exist. If there is no post with this ID, just return a response with this status dot http 404 not found. Let's import response and status from REST framework. REST framework response, import response from REST framework dot import status, like this. Now let's implement the actual method. So we wanted to work with get method, HTTP get method, so we define get method here. We implement that. Self request. We also want to pass pk, and format will be none. So my post self dot get object pk. So we use the method we already defined here, get object. And now if my post is public, or there is a user in the request and the user is authenticated, you're allowed to return the data. And here I'm gonna use a new serializer. I'm gonna create it in just a moment. My post detail serializer. This is what I'm gonna call it. My post detail serializer. And I'm gonna pass my post as the data. And simply I want to return response serializer.data. Otherwise, if the post is not public and the user is not authenticated, we just want to send a status message, status flag with status.http 401 on authorized, something like this. Yes. Now let's create this serializer. So as you noticed so far, serializer in REST framework is responsible to restructure the data in a way that you can basically do all sorts of things. You can return the fields you want, and you can also add some other functionality to that. But the whole point is that it's a black box that get a raw data and then returns the data you want in a nice format. And then it also makes it easier to return the data as a response. Let's fix this response here. Response. Copy the serializer. This is not a crash course for Django or React, so I'm not going to explain everything here. Just try to show you the big picture, how different parts work together. And actually the main focus of this tutorial is technically the Google authentication. So the second part we're going to work on. In the serializer class, my detail serializer, I'm going to use model serializer class meta model my post, and here for fields I'm going to return everything: ID, title, body, and the flag. Okay, so we have serializer, we have the view. Let's import it. We have the view, also we have the URL. So let's try. We can go to Thunder client here. Let's use this blog post and the ID for the post. So for instance here I can say 1. You can see that I got the data for the post. Now if I try in C2, well, the return is unauthorized error message. So because we don't have access to the post because we are not logged in. We will implement this part later in the second part, but for now it's quite good. I think it's time to use these two APIs in the front end to fetch data. So let's do it. Now I'd like to mention something. When we installed Django RestFramework, I forgot to tell you about the configuration, which we don't need it actually at this point because we are just using the REST framework for fetching data. We're not entering any data into the database. But it's better to do it first when you install a module. install the library. So let's go to DjangoRestFramework, to the installation part. There should be some guides there. So you just need to install it, then add REST framework to the installed apps. Let's make sure that we've done that. So here in settings, so we didn't add it to the installed apps, and it's basically when you want to do the migrations, it's important for that time. We didn't need it, but it's better to do this configuration. So I'm gonna add it to the configuration here. Save it. And that's pretty much the initial configuration we need. Later on, we want to add some also some extra configuration for permission classes, for instance, but that's for now, I believe. Okay, let's start implementing front-end part and use the APIs we created. So I'd like to start with, let's go to front-end, sourcey, pages, and post list page. I want to start with this, and I want to fetch the list of all titles and show it here. To do that, I'm gonna create a function for fetching data. So I'm gonna call it const get post list, something like that. We'd like to use arrow functions here. So we use fetch module here simply. The API was blog posts, and then when you receive the data, do this get response and return response to JSON. Then when you have that, simply get the data. And now here I'm going to introduce a new concept in React.js. If you're not familiar with that, it's called states. Basically, states are similar to variables, but the point is that components are dependent on states, and you can re-render components based on states. Let's import the hook for that. It's use state hook. And then I'm gonna create a new state for that. I'm gonna call it posts. So basically in posts state, we wanna keep the list of data we want. And then also use state hook returns a function, a method for updating posts state. We can't just, like variables, change the data inside state. Set posts and use state empty brackets. And now here I can use that function, set posts function, to update posts state with passing data into this method. Now if there is any error, if it didn't work, just do this, get the error, and print some message for us. Console log, like you could say fetching post list error, and we can add error, print the error we received. So that should be all, I think. Now the problem here is that we need to use this get post list somehow when we open the page, when we render the page. So we have a hook in React. It's called use effect, and basically with use effect we can execute all kinds of codes and functions based on some circumstances. For instance, here I want to say that use effect. Inside I want to use arrow function and get post least. And as the second argument, we need to pass some states. Basically, we want to say that if this state gets changed, execute all the lines here. But here we just want to render execute the code here only when we open the page for the first time, when we render component for the first time. So we just need to pass empty array because we don't have that much time to go through all the details. So I highly suggest that you watch my other tutorials on Django and React. But I think that's good enough for now. So now when we have the posts in post state, we can use it to render the components here. So basically I can say posts.map. So you need to put it in curly brackets. Arrow functions, it's gonna pass post as the first argument, and as the second argument it's gonna pass index for that element in the array. And inside here I wanna render an item for the list. So also in React you need to add a key. It shows you an error if you don't do this. It should be like this. List grow item, and then inside here I'm gonna print the title. So say post title. But as I mentioned before, I'd like this to be a link. So we could use basically a tag in HTML, but it's better to use link component from React Router DOM so that we can add our defined path to it. So let's set toAttribute to be, so when we click on the title it should go to the related post. So I'm gonna have an address like this, blog post, and later on we want to put ID here. So let's just keep it like this for now. Save it, and well, okay, so now we need to import link component. Import link from React Router DOM. Let's check if there is any error. Let's see the end result. The browser. If I go to the main page, nothing's here. Let's check if there is any error happening. Console. So check the networks. Let me refresh here. So okay, the problem is that when actually we didn't set the proxy for this, basically the domain or the IP or and the port number for this API. Go to package.json, and here let's set a proxy for that. It's gonna be localhost API, basically port 8000. And I'm gonna remove this slash, and I think we need to restart the server to make it work. kill the port first. npm start. Okay, something's wrong. Well, we didn't add HTTP, the beginning HTTP. Run it again. So let's check posts and response, and we get the data. It's okay here, but there is something wrong with, so suppose use a fake, get post list, and here, so because we are not returning anything, we need to use parentheses here instead of curly bracket. And now we have the post titles. Also, let's add the badge here to see which title is private, which one is public. So I'm gonna use Bootstrap badge component. This one, just copy this one and put it after the link. In here, I want to say VIP. So basically, we want to show it if the post is not public. So here we can use conditional statement, post public. If true, show nothing. Otherwise, show VIP. Let's see if it works. Okay. Well, it goes to this URL, but we haven't implemented that. So I think it's time to implement that part. Let's go to post detail page. We pretty much want to do the same thing. So let me grab everything I have here. Just copy that and paste it here. Also the imports. And I'm gonna remove S from posts because we have only one post, and here the API is blog post and the ID for the post. So somehow we need to pass, when we click on one of these titles, we need to pass the ID for this post. So basically, instead of its ID, we want to have the actual ID for that post. So let's get back to post list page here, and instead of ID here, I'm gonna say use post ID. So let's refresh. Okay, we are not in the home page. So here, if I click on this, it goes to this URL. Now, based on this URL, we can get the ID from the URL and then use it in this API. So to get a parameter from the URL, we need to use param, use params, basically function from React Router DOM, and simply here I can say const, and I want to name it post ID, use params, and also we need to define it in our routing system. So go to app.js, and here you need to define it like this: post ID. Now we are able to get the ID param from the URL in post detail page. We have post ID. Now we can pass it to the API. So simply I can put it here. Make sure that you use backticks here instead of single quotation. We response, get response, data, set post, fetching post detail error. And now here I'm going to use post title instead of this. Post title instead of this, I'm going to use post body, and that should be it. Let's see. Okay, now you can see that if I go to if I go to home page, here if I click on this, you can see the title and the body. But if I click on VIP, we shouldn't be able to see a content. So as you can see, there is no content. So we can write a message for the user. So if there is post body, show the text, otherwise show a message. You need to log in to see this post. I think it makes sense. And now it's correct. Let's fix this and links in the nav bar. Header, and I'm gonna call it my blog. I want to make it to point to the main page. It should work with a element here, a tag element. Now if I click on this, it goes to the home page, but we can see the VIP posts. So I think this is time to start working on the second part, which is implementing user authentication so that we can see the VIP posts here. Now the very first thing I'd like to do is adding a button for login with Google here. So we can use simply a Bootstrap button. Let's go back to the header here, and instead of these I can just come up with a link or with a button, or actually I'm gonna use a ready to use button for Google authentication, but we need to just install the module for that. It's called npm install. It's called React Google DOM. It's not something important. There is no module with that name. Let's search it to see if I can find the right name for that. React. Maybe this is the, or actually npm. React. Yeah, it's React Google login, not DOM. My bad for this. We don't have to use this button. We can just come up with a regular button, but it looks better and it's easier to use. So it's not really big part of this process. Now simply we can here import the button, import Google login button. Well, what I'd like to do is that let's create a component for that here. I'm gonna call it Google login button.js. It's a component, and now inside this component I'm gonna implement everything related to Google authentication. So the very first thing is importing the Google button from React Google login, and now I can use it here. Instead of these, and just say Google button. It should have a label. So sign in with Google, for instance. Let's close it. Now we need to import Google login button from same folder, actually Google login button, and we can put it here. So if I take a look at this, there is something wrong because we installed a package. Let me restart the server. npx port first, and now run it again. pm start. Let's see the console. Require client ID. Well, actually, the problem is that we have a couple of modules to do Google authentication, but this one is actually do the authentication, but I just want to have the button here, so I need to use React Google button instead of React Google login. So let me install this module. npm install React Google button. Now if I save it, check it one more time. Now we have a nice sign in with Google button. Now for the actual authentication, because we wanted to send some requests, one request to Google server to send the our client ID, and then it shows the user a pop-up for doing the login and the rest of work. So for the front-end part, we can use a module called React OAuth Google. It's a popular module for this, and actually I think comes from Google itself. I'm not sure, but it's really popular. So I'm gonna install this module first here, npm install. Shit. Oh, I made a mistake here. I need to, maybe it works. I don't think so. I added npm install twice here. So we can check packages to see if we have React. Oh yeah, it didn't work, so the right way is just to install it this way. Well, actually we have it here. Amazing, it worked. Okay, now we get back to header.js. Actually, we want to implement it in Google login button. So here I can just import use Google login from React OAuth Google. And inside here, I'm gonna create a function const, let's say login, or actually I'm gonna use it like this. I want to have login use Google login, and then we pass some parameters on success. We handle success. We're going to create that function. Should flow must be of code. Now we can pass this login function basically to onClick. So here, when we click, it executes this function, basically use Google login. So let's test it. There is no handle success, so let's create it. Const, for now it's just an empty function. Must use with Google OAuth provider, yes. So we need to get back to app.js, and here at top I'm gonna import Google OAuth provider from React OAuth Google. And then I'm gonna wrap the whole thing with this provider. I'd like to put it here, maybe it's a good place. Google OAuth provider. And here, this is the place we actually pass our client ID that we're going to get from Google Console or Google Dashboard, basically. Google ID. Let's close it down here. Google OAuth provider. Let me copy this. Something's wrong. Okay, it's not correct. Okay, now we need to put our client ID, keep it in this variable client ID here. So simply here you can say that const client ID, and we just need to pass the hash we're going to get from Google Dashboard just a moment. So let's first test the whole thing. And if I check, we have a nice button. If I click on this, there will be a pop-up window, but it doesn't work because we don't have a valid client ID. So what I want to do now is that you need to go to Google dashboard or console, basically Google console, console.clock.google.com. Here I'm going to do it from scratch. So we create a new project, call it whatever you want. I'm gonna say that login blog with Google, something like that, and create it. Now it's ready. Select the project. Now from the dashboard, I'm going to go to API and services, to OAuth consent screen. External, create. Give it a name. Blog app, something like that. Support email. And just hit save and continue, and also add email address. Save. And save and continue. You can add test users. I'm gonna add my email here. So this is just for test purposes. Save and continue. Okay, now everything's good with this OAuth consent screen. Now this next part is going to credentials here. Create credentials, OAuth client ID. Application type, I'm going with web application. Let's keep it that way. Now here I get client ID and client secret. So just copy this client ID. That will be enough for the frontend part. And I just want to put it here. Save. Now let's get back to the project. Try again. Okay, there is something's wrong still here. Let's check the client ID again. Okay, one problem here is that we forgot to add authorized JavaScript origins. So we need to add our URL here. That should be fine, I think. Let's just save this. Now try one more time, refresh. And now you can see the pop-up with all the emails you have. So you can continue to log in with one of your emails. Actually, you need to continue with the email you already submitted as a test user. Continue, and it will return some access key back to the front end. So we need to catch that and then send it back to server. So here what I'd like to do, want to work on the handle success function here, so we can see the data we get back from Google server. It's gonna pass code response, and I can just print it. Console log code response. Try one more time. Continue. Continue. And you can see the response back from the Google server. Now we need to send this code to our backend, and with our backend in basically with Django, we need to verify this code again with Google server. So I think it's time to go to the backend part and create an API for this. So I'm going to create a new app for handling users stuff in the backend. So here Python manage.py start app, and I'm going to call it my user okay. Let's create a URL file, urls.py. So let's define URL patterns. We want path. So to verify the code, I'd like to have an API for that. I'm gonna call it login with Google basically. Also here I'm gonna use a class-based view, so let's call it login with Google as view, and a name for it. It's going to be login with Google. Import the view from views, login with Google. In just a moment we create this view, and also let's import path from Django.urls. Import path, go to views, class login with Google, and I'm gonna use API view for this. So from REST framework .views import API view, and here I'm gonna implement the post method because we want to use HTTP post method for that. Post self request, and here we need to check if we have the code inside request data, because basically request data is a dictionary. We need to check the keys. I like this. So we then get the code request.data, and then now I want to exchange the code with the information we need to create or retrieve the user from our database. Basically email, username, first name, last name, and other informations. And we want to send this code to Google server, and then Google server will return us the information we need for that user. This is basically doing the login and doing the authentication with Google. I'd like to come up with a function for that. So simply I say that I'm gonna keep the data in ID token, and I'm gonna call the function like this: get ID token with code method, with code basically, and we would just want to pass the code. I believe that this is the most important part of this tutorial, and actually the most important part of implementing Google authentication. And actually I have watched a lot of videos on this, I have read a lot of articles on this, but couldn't find actually a really good article for a combination of Django and REST framework using Google authentication. And it was really hard to actually do this. So that was the main reason why I wanted to do this tutorial. And actually there is a main way to do this is using Google API to verify the token. Also there is another way that basically is based on a Google module, that inside that module basically it uses the same API. So there are two ways. One is based on a module, it's more abstract, it's implicit. The second way is basically you need to send the request yourself, you need to do everything. It's more flexible. So I'm gonna do both ways so that you can understand how it works behind the scene. But I highly suggest that if you just wanted to do the job, go with the first way, which is using the Google module for that. But if you want to understand how it works behind the scene, also do the second way. But I'm gonna do it both ways. Okay, so I want to have two different functions for this get ID token with code. Let's say method first, method 1, and later on I'm gonna create another method. So instead of creating the function here, I wanna create another file called utils.py, and I'm gonna put the function here. So let's define it. So for the first way basically, which is more abstract, we need to install OAuth 2 client module. Let me search for it to see Python module OAuth 2 client. This is a module, I believe it's from Google. It's supported by Google at least. Yeah, this one. And let's install it. Just need to copy that, put it here. Then we need to import it. Import OAuth 2 client from this module, import client. That's all we need from this module. Let's define a function get. Let me just copy that, it's easier. We want to pass the code. So here for actually communicating with Google server, we need to have client ID and client secret, which is here. Go to your Google console. We created OAuth 2 client. Here, if I check it, back, if I hit download, yeah, we have Google client ID and client secret, or we can actually download JSON file. This is what we need now for this module. Later on, for the second wave, we're going to use client ID and client secret, but JSON already included both client ID, client secret, and other information as well. So let's just download it, and we need to put it in our project. So you can just grab it and put it in the root of your project here. And I want to rename it to be client secret would be fine. The JSON. And here the only thing we need to do, credentials client dot credentials from client secrets and code. So here we first put the path of our JSON file we downloaded, so it's in the root, so we just need to enter the name secret, the JSON, and then as the second argument we need to pass the scopes we actually need to get information from Google server. For now I'm just gonna pass an empty list, and as the third argument we need to pass our code here. So that's all we need to do, and then we can just return credentials ID token. But before that, to see what we get from Google server, I can print credentials to make sure that it works fine. So now we have the view, we have the method. Let's import a method from .utils import. Let's check the URL. We have the URL, login with Google. So I think it looks good. Let's try it with Thunder client. New request. And here I'm gonna use the same URL. New request. And one thing I think I forgot to do is that if we take a look at main URL file in our core app, there is no sign of user module. So let's add it, path. So whenever the path starts with user, use URLs inside my user app, basically my user URLs. Okay, cool. Let's get back to user login with Google. If I do it with get method, let's try it, see what we, if I check the log, not found. Okay, there's typo, user sent. Get method is not allowed, so let's try post. And here it expects to get a response. So let's return a response. Where's the view? It's a bit messy here. So then return response. For now, I'm just gonna return a text. OK. Import response from REST framework dot response port response. Try the request again. Thunderbird, Thunder client. Send request. So it says OK. If I check the view, so if there is code in the request, does this, but there is no code in the request. So let's add it to our body here. Should be basically in JSON format. So code, and we for now we just can get the code from the client. You can actually right click and click on inspect and go to console, login, continue. Now we just need to grab this code for the user, put it here, and I should note that this code is for one time. So if you send a request to the Google server, after that you can't send any more requests because this is only for one time. Something's wrong with this, I believe, bad string. Maybe I need to use double quotation here, or use double quotation here instead. And we don't need this. Send it. Okay, something's wrong. Missing property, redirect URIs in a client type of web. Let me add the scopes as well there to so here I want to have a bunch of things. Email, for instance, profile. I can complete it later on. For now I think it's good enough. Let me check the JSON file here. I think something's missing from this JSON. We actually need to add, if we go to our client here and click on edit, we need to add some authorized redirect URIs here. So let me add this one. Also add localhost port. Make sure with 8000. That should be okay. Let's try one more time. Put the code again here. Let's try one more time. Okay, same error. So the problem is that we didn't download the JSON file again. So we need to download and replace it again. You can just open it in one tab. Copy the content and put it in our client secret file we already have. Save it. So now we have redirect URIs. Go to the front end, log in again to get a new code. Continue. Copy again. Go to Thunder Client or Postman. Put it here. Send the request. And now I think everything's fine. So you can see that it printed out the object of credentials. So we need to see the content. Go to utils. Here I need to print ID token. Basically all the information we need is inside ID token. So one more time I need to log in. Every time you want to test, you need to log in, because that code is one-time code. So put it here and send the request. It's weird invalid grant bad, so something's wrong with this code. Let me try one more time. Continue. Copy this code. Put it here. And try one more time. Okay, now we can see the information received from Google server about the user. We have the email for the user. We have first name, last name, and some other informations that we don't need it actually. We just need the email and maybe first name and last name, and also the picture for the user. So that's good enough for us to do the authentication in our system and basically retrieve the user from our database or create a new user with that information. Now let's implement the second method. Let's get back to utils here. I'm going to create the same function pretty much, basically with the same name. So here we need to specify the basically endpoint, the API we're going to use, which is https OAuth 2.googleapis.com/token. And also let's prepare the data we want to send with the request. I'm going to call it payload, and it should contain the code, client ID, basically our client ID, and our client secret, that we can have it from our dashboard in Google Cloud. So let me close this. Here we have this client ID, so we can click on this button, and I just need to copy that and put it here, and also copy that and put it here. However, it's not the right way to do it because it's a secret key and we should keep it out of the source control if you want to use source control. So a better way is to actually use an environment variable to keep these numbers. But for now, I just want to go with this. grant type should be authorization code. And the last part, which is really important, and if you don't know this part, it's going to be really difficult for you to find the answer. And this was the part that took a lot of time from me to find the right answer for this. It's redirect basically URI. And here the only thing you need to put is just post message text. That's all. You don't need to enter the IP or the port or a path, because we are sending the request from the backend. The only thing we need to specify is post message. I believe that this is something hard-coded in the API, in the Google Server API, and this is a trick to actually fix this problem with redirect URI. I've seen a lot of suggestions around the web, but this is the one that works. So that should be all for the payload. Now let's also create the body. We wanna basically encode it. So I'm gonna use URL leap for that. Parse URL encode. Pass payload to that. We also need the headers. Content type. Application should be this format. URL encoded. Let's import URL leap. Simply import URL leap. That's all pretty much. Now it's time to send the request and get the response. And I'm going to use requests module for that. Post token endpoint, and then pass body as data, and also the headers. So if response is okay, get ID token from response.json, like this. And now to actually the ID token we get is basically a hash code. It's hash encoded, so we need to it's a basically JWT token. We need to decode it. So we use a module called JWT, which we need to install it. I'm just going to use it here, and I will install it in just a moment. ID token, and options would be verify signature. It should be false. So let's import the modules we need. Import requests module, and also import JWT. I believe we need to install JWT module, but let's check. We don't have requests too, so it's here. Python actually pip install requests and also JWT. Okay, now here if I save again, everything looks good. And here, otherwise, if response is not okay, just print something, print response for us. And return none, basically. So now instead of method 1, we can use method 2. Just replace it in the view. I'm going to change it to 2. And also I'd like to import both. So here it should be the same as before. The logic here we have is the same. We get ID token, exchange it with code, but the method we use behind the scene is a bit different. Let's make sure that it works. Go to the frontend part and log in again, get a new code. Copy under client, the API login with Google API, put code here and send request. So something's wrong. Invalid JSON payload received unexpected token. So something's wrong with the token. Utils. Let's check the API again, the response we got there. I believe we have typo here. I need to add another P here to make it application, because the URL gets encoded, the body gets encoded, so the content type wasn't right and it couldn't decode it. So let's hope that this was the problem. I'm gonna try one more time. Okay, at least the response was okay, but the problem is with JWT. Let me copy this and search Google. Okay, we need to install PyJWT, not JWT alone. Pip install PyJWT. Let's make sure that this is the right name. Okay, now let's try again. Copy. Send request. And now it seems that everything's fine. We just need to print the ID token, but it's not really necessary. We've already seen what it includes. So let's complete the login with Google view here. We have ID token, which includes email address, first name, last name, and other information. We just need to use user email. So we can say ID token email. And now here I'm gonna either create a new user or retrieve the user if there is any user with this user email. So let's create a new function for that. So I'm gonna call it authentication or let's call it authenticate or create user, and then we just pass user email, and as soon as we have user we can get the token. But let's first create this function. Up here we can put it in utils, but I think for now it's just fine. So I'm gonna say from Django country of models import user. We're gonna use the user model already available in Django, and then here I want to say user objects get, give me the user who has this email, but there is a chance that there is no user with that email, so it's better to use try and catch. So if we can't find it, except let's use specific exception, user does not exist. So if there is no user with that email, create a new user. So user dot objects dot create user. For the username I'm going to use email as well as the email itself, like this. And finally we can return the user. So here now we have access to the user. Now it's time to create the JWT token for that user. So we can simply import the necessary method or function from simple JWT. So basically for authenticating user, when you have Django REST framework, one of the best modules is REST framework simple JWT, and basically JWT is a system to authenticate users. So let's install the module pip install REST. Let me search for the correct name. REST framework simple JWT. So this is the module getting started. Copy this. And there should be some settings for that. So we need to add the module to installed apps first. Go to settings, and here also for REST framework we can add this default authentication classes. So let's do it. Settings, Also, we have some extra options for simple JWT, but we don't want to use it now. Maybe this access token lifetime, which is really short here, it's 5 minutes by default. I'm going to change it to be maybe 5 days. Import time delta up here. Okay, I think that's all the configuration we need here. Let's get back to views and import from REST framework simple JWT tokens, import access token. And now I'm going to use this access token class to get JWT token, access token for user, and we just need to pass user. And now we need to return this JWT token as the response. Access token, pass the token here. Also, let's return the username as well, which is the user email. That would be all, I believe. Now let's try this API one more time. Log in again. The hard part is that you need to get a new code every time. And send request, something's wrong again. Time delta is to run server again. No module in REST framework simple. We have typo there. Frame work simple JWT send. Okay, we have another error. Access is not JSON serializable. Views access token. I believe we need to pass str in the string format. That should work. Not quite sure. There's one way to find out about it. And now we successfully got the access token and also username. Now we can actually use this API in the front end and use this access token to authenticate the user. Now let's go to app.js. Actually Google login button.js here. And after we basically here when we get for handle success, when we get code response, we want to send it to the backend. So here let me grab the code and put it in authorization code response. dot code, and here we're going to use our API, which is user login with Google, and here we can send the parameters. Method would be post, also headers must be content type application JSON here, and the next thing is body, which must include the code, authorization code basically. So we want to send the body in JSON format, so use JSON.stringify, and then we pass code, which is authorization code. Now then when we get the response, we can response we can again return the response in JSON format, and then we get it back with data like this. And now we can work on the data. So what I like to do is I want to store the data in local storage so we can access it even when the user closes the tab, because this is the access token, and even the user leaves the page or closes the tab, we wanted to keep the user logged in as long as the keyword, the access token, is valid. So we use local storage for that. Set item access token data, which includes access token like this, and also we can store the username basically. So this is exactly the data we set here. If I check the views, and here in login with Google Views, if we check response, we can see that we have access token and username. So we get these two values and then save it in local storage. Data, username. Now what we want to do after login, we just want to navigate the user to the home page. So we can use navigate functionality here from React Router DOM. So I'm gonna import it. Import use navigate from React Router DOM, and here up here I'm gonna create a new const for navigation. Navigate equals to use navigate should be use navigate, and then with this stance we can navigate the user to the home page like this. That's simple. And one thing we need to consider here is that we just store the data in local storage, but in the home page, basically later on in app.js, we want to implement the functionality to basically reading the data from local storage and then verify the access token, make sure that the user is valid, and then make it available throughout the application. But for this to happen, we need to make sure that the component gets re-rendered. So here, to make sure that the page gets reload, we can use window.location.reload. So basically, manually we reload the page. That should work. Also, let's implement when there is any error, so we can use catch method and get the error. Simply we can just print the error, console.error, error exchanging authorization code, something like that, and then just put the error itself here. Okay, now let's try this to see what happens. Clear the console out, login again, continue, and let me check network. So for this, we can actually check the local storage. Let me close this. You can go to the developer dashboard by right click, inspect, and go to application, and in local storage look for the local host and the port 3000, and here you can see that we have access token and username, so we can access this throughout the application. Let me remove these two and try one more time to make sure that it's not there from before. So login again, continue. Okay, here you can see that we have access token and username again. Okay, now let's go to app.js. So basically, when a user opens the tab for the first time, opens the website, the first entry point is app.js. So this functionality will happen always. That's why we are doing this here, because we want to make sure that this happens every time the user opens the website. Let's fix one thing here. We have the client ID here, but it's not a good way to keep it here, and it's better actually to use environment variables. So for that, we can use process.env in React. The only thing you need to do, we need to, I believe, create in the application, in the root folder, we just need to create a new file like this, env, put the variable we want. I can say, for instance, React app client ID equals to API here. Just grab this, put it here, save this, and then we can access this environment variable by process .inf dot the name of variable. So this should work. Let's do the login again to make sure. Well, there's a problem. So client, I believe we need to restart the application. Let me stop the server, kill the port. And run the server again. npm start. Delete the local storage keys. Login again. Continue. And now it works as before, with the difference that here if you want to use control version control systems like Git, you shouldn't put env in the repository, and because it's a secret key, this is the way that you can handle that situation. But let's get back to our job, which was implementing and basically verifying the access token we already stored in local storage. So what I'd like to do is using a state to keep the user information, because what we want to do, we want to get the read the access token from local storage, send it to backend, verify the access token, and then in return get the information. Or we can just use the username we already have. So here I'm going to say const user info, set user info, use state, and we need to import user state. Up here, use state from React, and I want to define a new function for verifying the token, verify token, arrow function, const. Let's grab access key from local storage. That's get item access token. Same thing for username. So username, and then now we need an API to basically verify the access token. So let's get back to the backend, add this API, and the point here is that we don't have to do anything at all. We just need to add the API basically, because the simple JWT provides us with that API simply. So let me go to the documentation for simple JWT. It should be around here, maybe very first few pages. Okay, here getting started, and as you can see, we have already an API there. Just copy that, paste it over here, import the necessary view, and basically that will be all. and I want to use token dash verify. Now let's get back to app.js here. So fetch user token verify. Oh, actually I prefer to use / so let me fix it in URLs here. Method would be post headers content type application JSON body JSON stringify. We just need to pass the token we have, or basically the access key or JWT key. And now we need to act when we get the response. If response is okay, just update the user info with the key and access, with the access key and username, and basically to update a state that is an object, we can use spread function or operator here. With this, we basically override the keys inside the object. Like this, I can say access token would be access key. We need to add curly brackets here. Username. So here what it does is that I'm gonna keep the access key basically and username in user info state, because we wanna have access to that throughout the application. So we're gonna keep it in this state. And with this, if the access key we already have in local storage, if it's valid, the only thing we need to do is just update the user info state here. I think it's good to go. Otherwise, if the response is not okay, just clear user info. Like this. User info access token null, username null, and that will be all. Now we need to somehow call this function, so we want it to happen when the user opens the website only once in the beginning. So we use useEffect hook here to run the function, basically for the first time, with passing empty array as the second argument. And for the first argument, we want to just pass an arrow function and call verify token. That will be all. We need to import, use effect hook here. There is an error. Link is not. Where is the error here? React hook use effect is called. Okay, verify token. Okay, we need to move it outside the function here. And now to actually have the access to this user info state throughout the whole application, we need to use something called context in React. So let's use it in this way. I'm gonna create a function, a folder called context here, and a file inside it called user context, because we want to use it for keeping the user information. User context, you can name it whatever you want, and we just need to import, create context from React const user context, create context, and export default user context. That will be all for this user context. Now we can use it wherever we want. So here at top, I want to import user context. Also, we need to wrap the whole application with that, like this. I can put it here. User context provider. And now we need to pass the values we want to have access throughout the application, which is actually here user info. And also I'd like to pass a method to be able to update the user info state. So I can either pass the method I already have here, set user info, or it's better to actually pass another function on top of that, so that later you can edit it if you want. So I say update user info, and now let's create this method. For now, basically it's just a simple function that calls exactly set user info. To pass value. And now we have access to both user info and update user info wherever we want. That's a good way to make states available throughout the application in React. There are other ways, but this is most popular these days, I believe. The very first place we want to use that is the header, because we want to show the login button only if there is no user logged in. But if there is a user already logged in, so we don't need to show the button, and we just want to say hello, and probably the username of the user and a logout button. So at top I need to import user context. And then here I need to say const. We get user info. It's really simple. Just say. Also, we need to import a hook here. It's use context. Say use context. User context. And now we have user info we want. And down here we can say user info dot access token. If there is access token, show this. Otherwise, show the Google button. You can put it here. And now inside here, I want to define an empty component and basically say hello user info username, and I want to show a logout button. Class name would be deflex line items center, or doesn't matter right now. Just say class name nav link. I'm going to point it to logout, which will be implemented later. Logout. Now we need to import link. From React Rotterdam. So it should work. Let's try it. Okay, element type is invalid. Expect string. Where is it? Where is the problem? app.js 48. Okay, user context provider. Something's wrong with this. Not quite sure. I think it should be uppercase. Yes. Well, yeah. Okay. Login again. Continue. And here, let me check. There's a problem with verify. So you call this URL with a post, but the URL doesn't. And slash. Okay. We need to add slash at the end. And now you can see that here we have user. If I refresh, still we have the user logged in. Now if I remove the data we stored in local storage, it should show the Google login button. If I try to log in again, and now here we have hello and the username, also logout button. So let's implement the logout button, which is really simple. Let's create a page for that and keep all the logic there. New file. Logout page. This is not the best practice for keeping the structure, but I'm doing my best here to actually give you the big picture and the end result. I'm not focusing on making things better. So in logout page, first I want to create a function called logout. Let's create a component or CE. And here I want to clear the storage, and then also want to empty the user info state. So I can get the function we defined for updating user info from use context, or user context, basically context, import both, use context. Also we need use effect later, import use navigate from React Rotterdam, and use effect inside use effect. So when for the first time, or the first render, actually in the beginning of render, just for once, remove item from local storage, access token, username, remove both access token user from local storage, also update user info with empty array, and then navigate the user to the home page. Also let's import navigate. Use navigate, actually we already imported that. Import user context as well, forgot to do that. Navigate cons navigate use navigate, and I think everything's set. Let's try it to see if it works. One thing is left to do is adding logout to the routes. Just gonna copy that, and here I can say logout and use logout page. Also we need to import it, and that should be all. Let me try. Logout page, logout page, use effect is not defined. Okay, where is it? Logout page, use effect. Okay, misspelling there. Now if I click on logout, you can see that it removes the data from local storage and the global state. Now as the final part, we want to make the user to see the VIP posts. Right now if I log in to see VIP posts, nothing happens. So because we are not sending the JW token with the request, so the very first thing we want to do is go to post detail page, for instance here. Now we need to get user info and pass access token. So let's import user context, also add use context. Here we can get user info, use context, user context, and here I wanna say const headers content type application JSON. If user info has access token, add it to the header, basically headers. As authorization, and here we want to say bearer. We need to add this prefix. You can change it in JWT, simple JWT settings, but that's the default. And now here I want to pass user info dot access token, and instead of here I want to pass extra parameters. Method would be get, and headers would be headers we already defined. So that's all we need to do to be able to see the VIP post, I believe. So let's try again. Okay, already we can see the post. If I go back, if I log out, no longer I can see the post because I'm not logged in. If I log in again, I can see the VIP post as a logged in user. That's amazing. That's pretty much everything we wanted to do here. And I think that's the end of this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed this video, you learned from this tutorial, and please leave a comment. And if you enjoyed this, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for upcoming videos. This way you can support me to create these kind of videos. Thank you. Bye.